It's time for the biggest story of the day. This is what made the cut with JJ and Alex on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Doug Smith brings you this portion of the program, an incredible selection of Kia, Subaru, Chevy, Jeep, Dodge, or Ram, all part of the Doug Smith family of dealerships, adding Mitsubishi also to that family as well. Nobody knows cars like Doug. Nobody knows the BYU Cougars like Mitch Harper. Mitch, thanks for joining us all the way from North Carolina, man. How are things out there?
You bet, guys. It's really humid. It feels like about 90 degrees.
How sweaty is it?
I'm sweating. So it is hot out here, and I must say it was a little bit surprising to see the amount of BYU fans on my plane right in. I just kind of chalked up that this game would be one where it may mainly be locals and maybe in the southeast region that would go, support BYU. But there was a good number of BYU fans on the plane, but. It's hot out here, and it's going to be an adjustment, and it takes time, coming out to the East Coast. So should be a good football game though tomorrow.
Mitch, how did you adjust to the time difference? I mean, how did you deal with that, man, on the way out there? I just don't know how a person does it.
Oh, I mean, I will say it's throwing me off a little bit to be talking to you guys at 6 o'clock, and I'm like, isn't Game Night Live getting ready to roll? But
it's almost bedtime, dude. Come on.
It's a little bit of an adjustment, but I think it's a little bit overblown. I think BYU's done this many times under Kalani, and honestly, they've been a lot better on the East Coast than they've been, all time. Kalani's had a lot of success in Eastern time zone games, and I think this is a game where BYU can have some success again as well.
How did having a bye week right now help them or hurt them in your opinion? I know you talked to some players and coaches this week. What were their thoughts on that? What have you observed?
Well, I think that one of the big things that kind of stood out was that the weird week 3 bye, maybe did end up being an okay thing for BYU, just from the standpoint of, getting Waylon Lapuaho back, giving an extra week for Justin Kirkland to potentially play. He's still kind of a to-be-determined situation, but, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see him. But, I think that, I think that's the biggest positive from all this is just getting another week and to give Bear Bachmeier more opportunities to develop that chemistry. But, I think BYU's got to come out strong in this game, though, because there have been times in the Big 12 era, last year against Utah, TCU, 2 years ago, coming off a bye week where BYU has not performed well, particularly offensively, and so they got to come out strong in this game and kind of see how they perform because it's been a little bit of a mixed bag at times when it comes to bye week performances under Kalani.
Is everybody healthy? Everybody coming out of the bye week? Everybody all hands on deck here? Anybody not make the trip?
For the most part, I mean, I think they're pretty healthy going into this game. That's going to be a spot where I think BYU, they got a little bit better with their personnel as far as health is concerned. But they'll be in a pretty good spot there. Getting Waylon Lapuaho back was probably the biggest addition back for BYU this week. He'll be anchoring that left guard spot for BYU. So I would say that's probably the biggest addition. And then you got Reggie Frischneck joining the wide receiver unit as well. We'll see on Tay Nakua as well, too.
Mitch Harper joining us from Greenville, North Carolina, as the Cougs get ready for, of course, East Carolina, who is one of these teams who everybody's looking at this one and going, okay, this is an upset alert for a lot of folks. Is that because we don't know much about BYU and Bear Bachmeier, I guess only 2 games in? Or is there something that we know about East Carolina now? And obviously their quarterback, everybody looks at it and they go, look, this Hauser kid's got a howitzer of an arm. This is a good quarterback who is somebody you got to watch out for. So my question is what do we know about BYU? Because I asked Sly about that about Utah. You're only 2 games in, and so there's still some guessing there. But what do you know about this team so far?
Well, I know that BYU's defensive line has been much improved this year, and BYU's linebackers are some of the best in the Big 12. I think BYU's front 6 or 7, whatever it looks, they go in that front is really good. And I think in the case of East Carolina, I think people are just kind of looking at, they won 38-0 last week against Coastal Carolina. And I think for Cougar fans, they think Coastal Carolina, they think when Coastal Carolina was good in 2020, Coastal Carolina might be one of the worst FBS teams this year. they're terrible. They only scored 13 points 2 weeks ago. Coastal did against Charleston Southern, who really one of the worst football programs in the country. So in East Carolina was only up 10-0 at half against Coastal in that game. The thing about East Carolina, they've got individual talent. They got some pretty good personnel, but they haven't been tested yet, particularly against a formidable rushing attack. And I think BYU has to establish the ground attack early with L.J. Martin and have some success on that early drive, even if it doesn't end up in a touchdown per se, but moving the chains. Don't go 3 and out and set the tone with L.J. Martin. I think that's going to be huge for BYU, but I just think people are looking at East Carolina and saying, big win last week, 2 time zones, kind of some of the cliches, but really when you dive in, BYU's a better football team. They should win this game. And will it be, a blowout where BYU's got the style points and 40-plus points? I don't see that, but, like a 24-13 type of win, yeah, I can see that. And I think BYU takes care of business, get in, get out, try to stay healthy and win that game, shrink up the game as much as possible by leaning on the ground attack. That can be done. I just think that, it'll be an energetic crowd. East Carolina's athletic director said they're expecting about 46,000 fans to be in attendance for this game, and that's pretty big. Their biggest crowd ever is 51,000 that they had 3 years ago. They're kind of rolling out all the stops. They're bringing in fireworks for the first time ever at Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium. They're going to have flyovers. They're going to do a lot of different things for these games because they don't get many power conference opponents to roll into Greenville. I mean, just looking up the population, it's only a town that has 87,000 people. So it's a small college town. It's a big opportunity for them to host a good power conference team. So they're rolling out all the stops, and I think that gives the uneasiness for people. But if BYU really is an AP top 25 team, like everyone's been banging the table saying they are, well, you should go in and win this football game pretty soundly. And I think BYU's got the chance to do that. There'll be moments of adversity, but I think BYU is definitely the better football team.
What's the next step for Bear Bachmeier in his progression? What does BYU, what does he want to see this week?
Well, I'd like to see a few more shots downfield. That momentum that they gained maybe at the end of the Stanford matchup 2 weeks ago where he has that deep completion to Chase Roberts. I want to see Aaron Roderick call some shots downfield for Bear and take some chances. Coming out of fall camp, he noted, Aaron Roderick did, the confidence that he has in Bear to be able to run the offense to the level of Jaron and Zach and Retzloff. Well, let's see it now. And this is going to be a much tougher spot than some of the other games that BYU has been in, just from the standpoint of being on the road. I don't know if East Carolina is a better defense personnel-wise than Stanford, but I think that East Carolina will have the home crowd behind them, and I'm curious to see if BYU takes more shots downfield. But ultimately, though, I do believe that rushing attack with L.J. Martin is the key to all this, and I think BYU goes as far as L.J. Martin will take them this year. He is so critical to the success of BYU this season. He's got to stay healthy. They've got to lean on him. He had 18 carries against Stanford. I think that's a number that you look at that they should target again and maybe get in that 20-carry territory, because I just think L.J. Martin, he's an excellent back, and I think he's one of the best in the Big 12. He had 131 yards against Portland State. He's averaging 9 yards per carry. He's just been really good, and I'm excited to see what he does in this game. I mean, East Carolina has some personnel up front. They got size. 300 plus. Three of their linemen have a lot of size to them. But I just think that I like BYU's offensive line as well, and giving that protection for Bear, opening things up for L.J. Martin. But I do want to see some shots given to Bear Bachmeier to take those risks from Aaron Roderick and stretch the field more. But I don't know if I'm just going into this game expecting just a huge passing total. If they can run the football and establish that, they'll lean on that and kill that clock. We forget that the clock does not stop anymore with these first downs. You can drain this thing pretty quick, and with that long distance travel, shrink up the game as much as possible and get in, get out, and try to get a win.
BYU, of course, then goes into conference play starting next week. When you look at kind of what they have to do this week and going into there, how big of a deal is it to be able to go in and get a win against a team that is got you kind of circled on that calendar? And it's a big, for them, It's a big move. If they beat BYU, they're in an interesting spot here because they're among a bunch of teams right now in the G5 kind of teams that are looking to try to make a move and to be the best one, the highest ranked one by the end of the year. What does BYU have to do to make sure that they get themselves to conference play at 3-0 and take themselves into that next version of whatever Bear Bachmeier is going to be when he goes into his first conference game?
I think, a big thing in this game for BYU to get this win is they do have to continue taking care of the football. East Carolina does a really good job of that. They're number one nationally in turnover margin, +5. They've only had one interception. That was in the third quarter last week against Coastal, and it was kind of a poor decision by Hauser on that throw. But they got to get a few takeaways. Against Portland State, they didn't really get any. It wasn't needed. There wasn't any threat of that. But Stanford, they had a few takeaways, one of which was probably the easiest interception Raider Mooney will ever get, the throw that Goldbranson made. But takeaways are going to be important here because, just setting up Bear Bachmeier for some short fields potentially or swinging the momentum, because I do expect East Carolina is going to get some yardage. That up-tempo attack, they're going to get some yards. About more than 65% of Hauser's throws come from either play actions or screens. They're going to be up-tempo. They're going to get it off quick. So they'll get yardage. But BYU's just got to get those momentum-changing takeaways and stops, which has been kind of a calling card under Jay Hill defenses. And I think they'll tighten up, too, and try to limit East Carolina from getting into the end zone. They haven't allowed a touchdown yet this season. It'll be a tougher task to do that this week. But, maybe they could do that. BYU's also been really good in non-conference spots since joining the Big 12. They're 8-0 all time since being in the Big 12 in non-conference play. They'll have another chance to get a perfect 3-0 mark heading into conference play, which is just a nice boost for a true freshman quarterback. I know the bar is much higher than simply getting to a bowl, but, if you can get to 3-0, that's a nice accomplishment for a true freshman quarterback heading into Big 12 play against, a couple teams in Colorado and West Virginia. You don't want to always just play the schedule game and look ahead, but it could set up quite well if you get this one to get to 5-0 and, be a few weeks away from a big rivalry game at midway point against Utah.
Well, I mean, that's definitely what I want to go into. I know, the cliche statement is to not look ahead, right? Take it week to week, but how can you not? You got 6 games essentially here that you got lined up back to back to back, and I don't think they're going to be easy, right? Especially when you get to your Arizona, Utahs, Iowa States, and Texas Tech. What have you heard from the coaches, or is there any thought process? I don't know if it was maybe from training camp or here in the last week or two or during the bye week. What have people been saying about getting ready for that 6-game skid?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's going to be that stretch between Arizona to TCU. I mean, I think that's one of the toughest stretches in the history of BYU football because I think any one of those teams, all of them potentially, could be ranked at the time BYU plays them. Mm-hmm. So this is going to be a real tough stretch. And I never believed in the narrative that was out there in the preseason that BYU had the easiest schedule in the Big 12 because, I think this show, you guys knew, like, TCU and Texas Tech could be pretty good. And we're still see what those teams will be. And then the rivalry game and just how it all set up was very difficult. And so that's why I think this type of game tomorrow takes on just greater significance because, at a minimum, you want to be an 8-win football team with a true freshman. Like, again, it's a long season. It's going to have some ebbs and flows to it, but you want to get to at least 8 following up an 11-win campaign, and because that could be something you can really build on long term. But you'll go from Arizona to TCU. Those could be games where you're an underdog in all of them, and it wouldn't be shocking. But I mean, you could be a favorite too. But that's the Big 12, and I just think those are some really good football teams in that stretch. But that's what BYU's wanted, and that's why they're loving being in the Big 12 because they want that competition every single week, and that's why it's been a huge area of focus to really build out this roster and have the depth necessary to withstand that type of stretch in a schedule. And I think BYU does have the depth to handle the rigors that will be upcoming in this schedule down the road. But it just highlights the importance of games like this where you are a favorite on the road go take care of business because there's going to be much tougher challenges ahead.
Mitch Harper, he's out in Greenville, North Carolina. He'll be, of course, giving you every beat of anything that happens with this BYU football team along the way. He's the best in the market at what he does covering the Cougs. Mitch, we're looking forward to it, man. KSLSports.com, you can find his byline there. And then, of course, I'm assuming you guys will have an edition of Cougar Sports Saturday tomorrow, obviously, before the game as well.
Yeah, we will. 3 hours extended pregame in Greenville. So we'll go live from Dowdy-Ficklin and then get you ready for BYU and East Carolina. Like you said, at KSLSports.com, we'll have all the bylines and social media content and updates throughout the day.
There you go, Mitch Harper. Mitch, thanks, man. Safe travels when you come back this way, too.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
There you go. Mitch Harper, everybody.